It's time for a super high level match in professional StarCraft 2, and what I got for you today is a Terran versus Terran, arguably speaking one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult matchups in the game. It's very much so like chess, and it's a very complicated strategy that you can usually expect from your opponent, while also being forced to counter it with your own. Regardless though, spawning here in game number 1 on Abyssal Reef LE in the top left corner, we got the blue Terran player, and he goes by the nickname of GuMiho. Now, actually, judging by this minimap, it looks like we may actually be in for a treat. Regardless, though, his opponent, spawning in the bottom right-hand corner of Abyssal Reef LE, playing with the red SCVs, and already sending out SCVs very early on into this match to the other side of the map. He goes by the nickname of ByuN, and ByuN is currently the world champion of StarCraft 2. Now, look at this. GuMiho is going for a proxy barracks, whereas ByuN is also going for a proxy barracks. This is gonna get crazy real fast, because both of these players are going for near identical builds right there, as you can see on the production tab. Pretty much identical there, and both of them are gonna try and end this game as early as they possibly can. Now, ByuN is very well known for his control in general. His Reaper micro is off the charts. However, GuMiho as of late has been showing some insane games as well, and I would even potentially put him just a little bit above ByuN right now when it comes to skill level. GuMiho has been really impressing me over like the last half year or so. We'll see how this one is going to turn out though, because they are indeed going to try and face off against each other in game number 1 here in a very cheesy fashion. Both of them are most definitely going to go and try to end this game with massive Reapers. Now, this will get scouted here by ByuN. ByuN will figure out about these double barracks here on the other side of the map. However, while it doesn't, GuMiho doesn't really know exactly what he is going up against just yet, the SCV here in the main base will indeed confirm what is going on, because the lack of the orbital command and also the double gas is a clear indicator of exactly what will go down here. Now, both of the players know exactly what's up. I think it will all just come down to multitasking and control. The player with the better control will be able to pick up a victory. Now, immediately, these Reapers are going to try and pick off as much as they can, while of course also microing the SCVs back at home. It's very important that you lose as few SCVs here as possible, because it's very much so a numbers game at this point in time. Second Reaper just about to join the first one as well. Of course, one thing to note about Reapers is that they do heal up over time. One of the things, though, that I'm really liking here for GuMiho, which is not necessarily true here for ByuN, is the fact that he's got the SCVs, right? He got these two SCVs here, still alive and kicking, and they're actually dealing quite a bit of damage, just soaking up a little bit here and there. But this is gonna go crazy real fast. Both of these players are trying to do as much damage as they can. So far, GuMiho did decide to go for the orbital command, so that means that he can lift up and get on out of there and continue dropping mules. There we do see the liftoff from the player in red. He's gonna try and see if he can potentially get to safety, whereas we see the exact same thing right now for GuMiho, the player with the blue SCVs. The question is though, who is really ahead at this point, right? When it comes to the worker count, there are 2 SCVs remaining here for GuMiho, where there's only 1 remaining for the Terran player in red. I think this is going to be one really dumb engagement here between the Reapers, and that will probably determine the outcome of this match, because they can't really escape very easily. Now, GuMiho was trying to take the high ground right there. I have the high ground! Give it up, you can't win! You gotta be real careful. Oh my god, this is gonna get messy so quick. ByuN does get a really solid hit off right there. He's trying to get the most out of all of these units, but he recognizes indeed that GuMiho controlled that just a tiny little bit better. And therefore GuMiho ends up obtaining the victory here in game number 1. I just love how I introduced Terran versus Terran as one of the most strategic and difficult matchups in StarCraft 2, and then the caster curse happened, and immediately both of the players decided to go for a little bit of cheese. In the end right there though, that previous match, it all just came down from one big engagement between the Reapers. A bit of a funny, early game Reaper shenanigans. Regardless though, GuMiho ended up coming out ahead, and that means that he is currently leading this series in 1-0 fashion. Now, remember when I said that ByuN is the current world champion of StarCraft 2? He currently still is. He ended up winning the WCS, the World Championship Series Grand Finals last year at Blizzcon, back in 2016. But as you may be aware, Blizzcon is rapidly approaching once again, and that means that it's almost time to crown the world champion once again. Now, interestingly enough, 16 players in total will be attending Blizzcon, and ByuN is not one of them. The way you essentially qualify for that tournament is by either accumulating enough points to be able to be in the top 8 of your region, and the region are essentially the circuit, which is everything outside of Korea, as well as Korea itself, or you can get seated by winning one of the premier tournaments, and ByuN did not quite make the cutoff point, sadly. It's actually really disappointing. He did not win a premier tournament in Korea this year. He also did not end up winning enough points throughout the year in all of the tournaments that are available, and a lot of people are quite upset about it, because there is no doubt that ByuN is one of the best 16 players on the planet. He just barely did not make the cutoff right there. So that does mean that while ByuN is currently still the world champion of StarCraft 2, it's only gonna be for a little while longer, because someone else will be crowned very shortly. Now, speaking of which, I'm gonna probably put my money on. Well, I'm not actually gonna do any betting, right? But if I were to, I would put my money on innovation. And I would probably have to cheer. I would probably have to like cheer for Neep as well. I think Neep has got a pretty solid chance at everything too, just because the guy's an absolute beast. And of course, he's one of the, you know, premier non-Korean players on the planet. I think that Serral might be able to do very well too. Also, of course, a non-Korean Zerg. I'm very much looking forward to it, but I think that the biggest chance is definitely gonna go. Look at this little bit of shenanigans there, both of them just trying to get a little bit of value there. Regardless though, I think the biggest chance for winning is most definitely going to be innovation, right? Innovation just makes the most sense there. Now both players are trying to do a little bit of damage. Both of them will actually end up getting an SCV kill there. Look at that one, burning to death by a gun. I don't even know how that works. I guess he must have shut the fuel tank or whatever off that SCV, but regardless, I think the innovation is going to be the safest choice, although really any of the 8 Koreans that are qualified, as well as... Oh, actually, look at that. He might be able to get the kill there. Once he jumps down at the very least. But I think that any of... Oh, apparently he had a death wish. Okay, well, that's disappointing. I think that any of the 8 Koreans can end up winning the WCS Grand Finals. I don't think anyone would be surprised. And I think that Neep has got a very good shot at this as well. Just because he's probably... I would probably put Neep either like first, second, or third place when it comes to... you know, best protos on the planet. The guy's absolute beast. I mean, you got Hero, you've got SOS as well, you got Stats, who are all very, very good. I think that any of them can, any of them can absolutely end up winning. Now, getting back to the game, before I start rambling about esports for a little while too long, this is more or less like an even trade so far. ByuN is gonna be capable of getting into that main base. That Reaper did end up picking a couple of kills, not quite capable of getting that final SCV here, who basically saw flashbacks to his first love and, you know, his family back home in the Terran Dominion, and, you know, he saw everything flashing in front of his eyes there for just a second, but he ends up living to mine another couple of resources for now. Really though, this is very even so far. I mean, judging by the production tab, you can see a slight deviation. There's going to be a Liberator coming out of that starport here for the player in blue, whereas ByuN decides to go for that Banshee instead. He's also getting himself that Cloaking Field upgrade, and on top of that, since he did indeed obtain a slight little advantage here as far as workers go, as well as like map control, he's going to be capable of just grabbing the watchtowers here for a little while longer. So he figures out that there's going to be 3 Hellions here for the player in blue, and actually a third one is waiting here as well for ByuN. ByuN, you're great at micro. Show us what you're capable of. This is kind of his specialty. Look at his control. Oh, man. How hard is that to do? In particular against GuMiho, right? Like, I want to point out, GuMiho is insanely good, right? This guy ended up winning a GSL this year, which is essentially the highest level of tournament, or the highest level tournament in StarCraft 2 outside of Blizzcon. This guy's a beast, and he did just end up getting a nice little lead there. Although, so far, I mean, that single Hellion did end up roasting a couple of workers there. Cyclone going in for the rescue though, and a third CC is coming up. Now, there is a Liberator inside of the main base here of ByuN. GuMiho is going to try and do as much damage. Ooh, actually, trying to eat some damage. Ooh, just a slight overextension there. Tried to use the Cyclone to eat a couple of the shots there to prevent these SCVs from dying. Cute little move, but at the same time, well, ByuN did not quite get the micro done right there with the Cyclone, and he slipped up for just a little bit. He is going to be able to get quite a couple of kills on this Banshee here already. Question is though, is he going to be able to do enough? Scan does get forced, and therefore the Banshee ends up dying. And really, even though like there's some back and forth action here, right? In the early game is just slightly ahead here of the player in red because of that quicker third CC, as well as the fact that he's got slightly more workers, and of course that advantage can build out very easily. Essentially, we are entering the mid game right now at a pretty even score. I mean, third CC is going down here just a little bit later for GuMiho, and this is the moment where you can see the wide variety of Terran versus Terran. It's quite cool. Like, quite literally every single Terran unit gets used in Terran versus Terran, with maybe the exception of the Ghost, which is very uncommon, although with the next patch that's coming up, you know, very shortly after the Blizzcon Grand Finals, Ghost will essentially gain Cloak right from the get-go. So I wonder if they're gonna, you know, become a bit of a cheese as well once again. Because Ghost, they're a cool unit, but they're very underutilized right now. All things considered, though, all Terran units really have their place in the TVT matchup, and I enjoy watching it a lot. It's very tricky. Now here we do see the auto turret. Ooh, he actually wanted to go for the auto turret, but then he scouted apparently that there are enough defenses, although he decides to go back in and throw it down anyway. Picks up a couple of kills, while really only costing him some energy there. So that's 2 Marine kills less, or that's 2 Marines right there less than originally was at. Now the reason, by the way, why Terran versus Terran is so complicated and why it's so strategic to play is because these units right here essentially dominate everything on the ground. Siege tanks are insanely good. However, siege tanks also got this nasty thing where they can actually shoot further away than they can see. Essentially what that means is that while you are indeed capable of dealing a lot of damage with siege tanks, you kind of do need something to spot as well, because if both players are going for siege tanks, the player with more vision will usually end up winning. Because of that, air dominance is very important too, but if you stick a little bit too much into air dominance, right? Say you go a little bit too heavily into your Viking play, and you're going to be able to give your siege tanks a lot of vision, the enemy Marines can easily start dominating you too, and because of the fact that Marines are very disposable, they can enter dropships and they can do a lot of damage that way. There's a wide variety of units that can be created to try and counter all of these different kinds of setups. It's actually very complicated to play. It's by far my worst matchup to play as well, just because there's so much, like, you know, I still made it to Master 1 with Terran, but Terran versus Terran, it's a very tricky one, because there are just simply so many varieties. I would say Terran versus Terran is one of the few matchups that doesn't really necessarily have one go-to build order. It really all just comes down to preferences, which units you are better at controlling. It's very tricky. For example, Ravens, I mean, a couple of months ago, they really made their introduction into the matchup when they first got a little buff there on that auto turret, and ever since then, they have become essentially the gold standard, but they are not a necessity. Imagine if you're opening up Ravens and your opponent is opening up Vikings. I mean, there's not a whole lot you can do with your Ravens, right? There's a lot of funny little things that you have to figure out when you're playing the TVT matchup, and it gets very complicated very, very fast. When in doubt, though, siege tanks, Marines, a bunch of air units are usually a pretty solid option. Now, GuMiho was indeed forced to put up a missile turret right over there. It does look like, though, the Raven already picked up 11 kills. And, of course, you can just go ahead and put up the missile turret right over there, or rather the auto turret, and it will just barely kill the missile turret there as well. So it gets very messy, right? Anyway, big engagement, though. It's trying to get set up right now by ByuN. On this map in particular, Ascension to IRLE, this central position is extremely valuable, because you essentially control the middle part of the map, and therefore you can expand very easily yourself, and you can also push into your opponent's potential 4th base, into their 3rd base, into the base over here. You gain a lot of vision of the center of the map, and of course, while that does not quite make you immune to any kind of, you know, flybys with medevacs, it is a very, very powerful setup. Siege tanks, though, are trying to inch forward right now, trying to get a proper location here, trying to make sure that they don't get hit just barely. And it looks like actually ByuN wants to go for it. He is pushing into siege top tanks, getting a lot of damage done here already. However, there are still a lot of siege tanks available here for the player in blue, trying to do as much damage as he possibly can. Here we do see indeed that Viking dominance, though, that I was talking about earlier. The medevacs do end up dying there, which is a big deal too. And while apparently, you know, ByuN is just barely going to be capable of trading effectively there, that could have really gone either way. He's still got a lot of reinforcing units, though, once again moving across the map. Both players upgrading their Marines now to 2-2, as well as going for those siege tank upgrades to deal even more damage. That was a ballsy move there by the player in red, but it seemed to have worked out just barely. He thinned out the amount of army units there available for the player in blue, and I wonder if this is going to be a good choice, though. He's right now pushing forward. Siege tanks are running very, very low here on HP, and it does look like he's going to be forced to lift up and get on out of there, although he may try and opt for a run-by instead. At the same time, GuMiho did send out a medevac as well. He's going to try and see if he can potentially push into this 4th base location of ByuN. ByuN's base, of course, very vulnerable here, but at the same time, the players are indeed trying to, you know, basically cycle throughout the entirety of the map. ByuN knows that there is a sensor tower up. He's going to drop inside of that main base anyway, while maneuvering the rest of his army to the northern end of the map instead. He's going to try and see if he can potentially distract this. Now, of course, this is going to be essentially 2 medevacs full of units that will get sacrificed. Will it create enough room here? I do not think that that is going to be the case just yet. GuMiho's defense being absolutely on point there, realizing exactly what's going on, and so far, no real damage does get dealt, but it's not done just yet. ByuN is going to continue onwards for a little while longer. He will be throwing down GuMiho, that is, the auto turrets right next to that siege tank, target firing it down as well to try and clean up this aggression, and GuMiho, with a brilliant hold there, did not even hesitate for a second. Right? And you gotta think ahead so far. You gotta make sure you get your siege tanks right here on the ramp, right? You gotta make sure you're defending this area as well. You have to make sure you send out your Vikings in a separate clump. You gotta re-rally your buildings to defend against the drop that went down in the main base. You gotta make sure you get missile turrets and a siege tank in place in the natural, just in case you get that weird setup going on here. And all things considered, being the defensive player in Terran versus Terran is very hard. It's very difficult to do, and GuMiho right there showed us some top-tier defensive Terran versus Terran, and so far he's been capable of securing himself to that 4th base location. And while currently he's only got 55 workers, right, he doesn't have quite as much just yet. His army supply is already starting to push a little bit ahead. At the same time, though, ByuN is boosting into the main base here of GuMiho. He's trying to do as much damage as he can. Siege tank is getting in position right now. He does not want to overextend with that beautiful move there actually by GuMiho, to simply re-rallying a couple of the units. But at the same time, we do indeed see a drop going down here at the sensor tower, splitting the Marines up to reduce that splash damage there as well. Marines will get picked up and dropped on out of there once again. They're gonna head towards the 3rd base location here instead. ByuN is trying to engage this at several different angles, but so far he's really not getting the look that he's going for. Now, GuMiho did indeed secure that planetary fortress. This has gone unscouted so far by ByuN, and with this many mules landing, I think that GuMiho must indeed be looking to try and solidify his position into this game. Now, with one dropship, right, this can easily still slip out of his control, but GuMiho is looking very strong. 4th base location now also being secured by ByuN. He's going to try and see if he can continue mining here, as the main base is indeed going to be running very low at this moment in the game, but it does look like we once again see a bit of an engagement right here in the middle of the map, where both players are trying to take control here of the center, right? They want to make sure they get as much vision as possible from these watchtowers as well. And actually, so far, both of the Marines are taking one of the watchtowers each. Gotta be very careful, though. Gotta continue those scans. Siege tanks are sieging up on the low ground, which is not that, great of an idea, because the siege tanks from the high ground, of course, do not need nearly as much vision radius, although so far, ByuN did manage to control that decently well. I'm still starting to get a little bit worried here, just for the sheer amount of numbers that GuMiho is producing right at this point. He's also switching towards Liberators, which I do like a lot. I think the Liberator play is going to be very helpful here to force these siege tanks to unsiege, and actually full medevac there from ByuN going down. At the same time, Marines are indeed stemming forward, pushing straight up that ramp. Very ballsy move there by GuMiho, but upon recognizing that the majority of those siege tanks were gone and ByuN's army was not quite reinforcing that just yet, he ended up obtaining a very nice little lead. Once again, though, this skirmish here for the high ground, it's crucial that you keep track of exactly where your opponent's units are located. Siege tanks are trying to get into position here. They're gonna siege up right behind all of those Marines. Stims forward, though, picking up a couple of the tanks. However, reinforcing siege tanks there already in the back of those Marine balls as well. And it looks like GuMiho has pushed into the center of the map and successfully secured it. And this is where the game becomes terrifying for the player in red. This is the moment where you can start slow pushing if you are GuMiho, because there are Liberators right now. Liberators are capable of taking all of these siege tanks and just basically force them to unsiege. It's a very tricky subject, but he can indeed deal a lot of damage that way. And here we go. He's gonna start to slow push. That siege tank is most definitely gone, and that means he's gonna be able to leapfrog all of these siege tanks forward, one at a time. Is there any air support right now for ByuN? There's actually nothing. There's just 3 medevacs here in total, and that means that this is going to be a very important engagement. Do you want to engage into that many sieged up tanks, though? Of course, you gotta be extremely careful. SCVs are now also being pulled off the line. They're gonna try and eat as much damage as possible. Reinforcing units are now also being intercepted here by GuMiho, playing this out absolutely brilliantly. I love this positioning here by him. Slow pushing his way into the 3rd base and making sure that he's capable of picking up all of these reinforcing units, right? And once again, he's gonna be capable of unsieging these siege tanks, leapfrogging them forward just a little bit, and after this, the Liberators will be able to move as well, and ByuN knows what's going on. He knows that he is trapped in the corner of his third, and he is gonna be forced to GG out of that game, and GuMiho ends up obtaining the victory in a 2-0 fashion. What an awesome match. I love games like that. Super hard to play, very high skill, but GuMiho ends up obtaining the victory. If you enjoyed watching this video, you know what to do, right? Make sure you hit that like button down below the video, but more importantly, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get a notification as soon as I upload more. Other than that, I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? And I'll see you in the next one.